Good morning to viewers all across the world. Welcome to your Poetic Interlude on the Weekend Show. My name is Emeka Ozurumba, and for this festive, let me say, political season, I did a piece I titled Spiritual Politics. I must remind you, spiritual politics is equal to spiritual governance. So politicians were gathered as heavenly bodies. They were floating merrily in the Milky Way. The sun was a president, the moon was a vice president, and the stars were legislators and lawmakers. And soon, they were engrossed in their extraterrestrial politics. And they decided their separation of power. And soon, each came with their destructive heralds. We're staring at a son who only believed in nepotism. A brash personality you can never look in the eyes. A personality with high-handedness in a hubris high horse, burning humans with his suppressive enigma. And finally, without a trace, he disappears and appears in another continent with all his looted funds and basks in the glory of another climate. But the people he left behind when he darkened his days were stranded in penury and mass poverty. The people he left behind were dying in poverty, but he was cruising in Bentleys and Aston Martins. He was far from the wild bushfire he had constructed. And sometimes, indeed, the sun is very harsh as a politician. And he gives men less than the sum of their labors. And he has no respite upon the epidermis. And soon the sun hands over power to the moon. And again, their democracy absolves into the spiritual. They have no concrete proof of good governance. The hegemony of the moon is only around inferior light. He steals with pens and signatures, something that they call authority stealing. And the way that they steal money, they are smoother than armed robbers and armed bandits. And they leave no traces to find their footprints. It was money to develop our society they were embezzling. And naturally, money is insatiable, so their thirst for money knows no substantial satiation. And they brought to the making their democracy built on quicksand, where roads are only built with word of mouth, where money to build public schools are embezzled, where bridges are only constructed in private bank accounts, where the Nigerian people are dying of poverty, and our tomorrow was weeping with only feeble referendums as blueprints. But the road to a successful nation and a society doesn't know our footprint. Instead, they lead us astray into the wilderness of poverty's sanctuary. And gradually, Nigeria is being destroyed, sabotaged by saber-toothed tigers and jackals, inclined into the grimace of a collapsed society. Spiritual politics involves the granule of gingivitis. It's spiritual politics too when the society is dilapidated and the leaders are stranded and can do nothing. And they are clueless and asleep. Poverty assaults the people, yet the leaders can do nothing. The country has bountiful resources, yet only a few are benefiting and enjoying those resources. It's spiritual democracy and politics when the dividends of democracy are not visible. Our country that was meant to be a safe haven became an atmosphere and climate of disasters and fears, where the normal Nigerian citizen lives unsafe and unprotected. And soon they would serenade the noisome siren and say, vote for me. But their politics has no concretization of credence, and their democracy has no substance of substantiation. Yes. This piece reminded me of Fela Aníkúlápó Kuti because recently in social media, I was seeing Mr. P and Seun Kuti ranting about the youths. You see, politics divides the youths, and we should not live in these divisible divides. How can we be arguing about people that are destroying our country and saluting them and saying, oh, let's do this, let's do that? How many times do we need change? We don't need change more than 2 times. We only need the correct change, and the correct change has to do with our personality, governance, accountability, integrity, morality, and if you don't have these things, you have no proof of good governance. Yes, my lovely audience all across the world, I want to shout out to my lovely producer, Andy Madiki Didi, my lovely friends here on The Weekend Show. Don't go anywhere and stay tuned. They have a very packed segment coming up for you on the political segment of The Weekend Show.